Or have you ever had a moment where you've made your best laid plans and then everything's gone awry? Everything's gone slightly not as you planned it. I'll always remember arriving at university, age 19, fresh face, and I did a deal with God. I said, God, I'll go to the Christian Union, but this is the plan. You're going to introduce me to a girl. We're going to get married by about second year, and then I'll have this great life. And that didn't happen at all. Or I remember a time in my life when I went camping with my parents, and we set up the tents, and it was all going great until the storm came, and we ended up spending the night in a farmer's shed. Best laid plans don't always go as we want them to, right? And there's something, isn't there, about making a plan. And I think about today's passage is all about those different sort of seasons of our lives. Seasons when some things go well and some things go wrong. The good times seem to be great, but then suddenly along comes a difficulty, something that sort of catches us out. And one of the questions that we can often be left with is there any meaning in this? Is there meaning in the good things and the bad things? Can we find God? Or maybe you could say, where is God in all that I'm experiencing? It's quite philosophical for 11 a.m. on a Sunday, but bear with me. And the reason we're talking about this is that we're in this book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is a wonderful description, really, or an exploration of this question of meaning in life. It's exploring, what does it mean to have a life? And actually, here's the question on the screen. It's written by King Solomon, and I think King Solomon is asking this. Is there a purpose in all that happens to us? Or another way of putting it is, can you find meaning in all the things that we are doing? The good, the bad. It's interesting because we know it's written by King Solomon, and King Solomon was a great character. There'll be a picture of him on the screen. But we think King Solomon wrote 3 books that are part of the Bible as we know it. The first one would be Song of Songs, which we think was written when he was young and in love. And then he wrote the book Proverbs, which, if you've written it, is full of great wisdom, written as a middle-aged man who has experienced some of the highs and the lows, and he's trying to advise his children not to follow in the path that he has led. And then here we have the book of Ecclesiastes. He's a much older man. He's looking back on his life. He's looking back at how he's chased pleasure. And we know, we've said this in previous weeks, we think he had about 700 wives, 300 concubines. He's chased after luxury. He's had the best things you could have. In fact, even Jesus talks in one of his stories and says, none of these flowers, they're all clothed even more beautifully than King Solomon was. Because we know King Solomon had the most amazing clothes, the most amazing possessions. But at the end of all his life, in this book of Ecclesiastes, he's grappling with the question, is there any meaning? Where is the meaning? Where is God in it? And he's doing it through this character. And we've mentioned this in the past. This character is called the teacher. And you see this back in chapter 1. And the teacher says, quite famously, meaningless, meaningless, all is meaningless. And this word meaningless is the word hevel, which is mentioned 38 times. It kind of means vapor or smoke or breath. It's there 1 minute, gone the next. Now you see it, now you don't. You can't hold on to it. And Solomon is saying, is life like that? And so he's using this character of the teacher to explore that question with us. And so here we are in chapter 3 this morning. And he's starting to look at it from a different angle. Do you have a look? He's exploring seasons. He's exploring time. It's a poem, really, and it's pretty famous. So let's follow it. It'll come up on the screen. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. Just before we move on, it's interesting, the teacher gives us a list that describes the highs and lows of all life. If you like, what he's going to do through this bit is paint a picture of life. It's not really about the individual aspects. It's a broad brushstroke of saying this is what life is like. He goes on. He starts with the beginning and end of life. He says, verse 2, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build. If you notice, it's always a bad event followed by a good event. We can't escape the fact that in life there's always good, but there is bad. And then verse 4, he continues, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. That one really confused me. Interestingly, in the ancient world, they commonly scattered stones on an enemy's land to hinder their farming. Anyway, there you are. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep, a time to throw away, a time to tear, a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. It's the highs and the lows. And what is he really saying here? What is the broad brushstroke that we're learning this morning? Well, from this passage, he is saying, and this is our first thing really, life is complex. We know that, don't we? But life is great 1 minute, and then the next things seem to go wrong. And actually, I don't know about you, I find this quite cathartic. Because when you pick up the Bible, you might think, oh, it's a holier-than-thou book that doesn't really understand how I'm feeling. But I think we can all relate to the fact that life can just be so complicated. Some things can go really well, some things can go badly, and yet that book understands, empathizes with you, God knows that we experience the highs and the lows. He knows that creation, as the Apostle Paul said in Romans, creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to this present time. Here, the Bible is acknowledging that life isn't as it should be. Things aren't as they should be. We grieve, we suffer. Yes, there are great moments, but then there are hard moments. And I don't know about you, but I just find this really helpful because I think growing up, I always had this theology of, as a Christian, before you know Jesus, life is easy. When you become a Christian, before you know Jesus, life is really hard. Become a Christian, life is easy. And then very quickly, as I'm sure we all have, I found out that wasn't true. I remember I arrived at university, became a bit closer to God, thought being Christian was great, and then I suddenly learned that my friend who had got married just after we all left uni was getting divorced. I then started a teacher training course in Canterbury. Again, I had this theology in my head of life isn't really that difficult once you're a believer. And then I did this placement, this teacher training placement in this secondary school, and I failed it. And I just was in shock. And I was like, actually, for the first time, I realized that life isn't easy. And then loads of other things started to happen. And maybe you can relate to that too. Life is complex. The second thing that the teacher is saying to us in this little first part of the passage is that not only is life complicated, but life is also quite monotonous. If you notice, that rhythm of the poetry is a time for. And what the teacher is saying to us is that actually there is this daily grind of life that is hard. It's hard to get up at 6. It's hard to put food on the table. It's hard to pay for something and then it breaks and you've got to go to work again. And it seems like an endless cycle. Don't worry, it gets more encouraging. But that's where we are at the moment. And if we're not miserable enough, verse 9, Solomon then, or the teacher then says, what do workers gain from their toil? Another translation translates that word toil as, it's the tasks that God has given us, the tasks. But then in verse 11, there's a shift, and I find this so encouraging. Do you have a look down or it'll be on the screen? It says this, He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to the end. And in this question of, is there any purpose or is there meaning, the teacher is starting to give us a suggestion. It's that God has placed eternity into your heart and into my heart, that we are made in the image of God. We're made to be like him, to have relationships like him, to be in relationship with him, to enjoy him, to feel things as he does. I love this quote by the pastor Frederick Mayer. He said this: God made man in his own image, and nothing more surely attests to the greatness of our origin than those faculties of the soul which are capable of yearning for, conceiving and enjoying the infinite, the immortal, and the divine. He's saying if you find in yourself something that isn't satisfied by this world, then let it be satisfied by the immortal. God has placed eternity into your heart, into mine, and that is where our meaning is found. That is in the one who gives us meaning. There's another quote that will come up on the screen, which is Augustine. If you don't know, Augustine was one of the kind of forerunners of the Christian faith from many years ago. And he said this: "My heart is restless until it finds its rest in you." I would suggest to you that Solomon was restless as he was exploring all the pleasures and all the luxuries. And yet here, as eternity is in our hearts, we see that desire to know the one who gave everything to be in our lives. It's a beautiful moment. And so if we finish really with this question, or he goes to this question, is there a purpose? And so then he goes into verse 12. He says, the teacher says, "I know there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken away from it. God does it so that people will fear him." And so in this question of is there a purpose and a meaning in all that happens to us, the conclusion and the thing the teacher seems to be saying that I would suggest to us this morning is there is a time for this and a time for that. But don't look there for our meaning. Don't look there because it's not designed for that purpose. We're called to follow God, to find meaning in God, to find meaning in the one who sent his son to suffer more than we will ever suffer in this world, who died, but then rose again and offers us that incredible life. And so here's our response that I want to suggest, is that we need to be able to say as believers, I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't understand why this is happening, but I know that you do. And I think that's a really hard thing to say as a Christian because we want clear answers. But actually, that's not what this seems to be saying. It seems to be saying life is complicated, and yet I will trust you. Life is hard. I won't understand the plans for my days. I can't see what's coming around the corner. I can't understand why you're allowing these things to happen. And yet, I'm going to find my peace in you. A few of us from the staff team went to the HDB Leadership Conference a few months back, and they had this lady being interviewed, and she told her story. And she was interviewed on the stage in front of 5,000 people. And this lady said, look, I wasn't a Christian. And then everything was going wrong in my life. And at one point, my grandfather was in hospital and he was dying, and I was in the waiting room next door. And she told the story of how she reached for a Bible, and her mum was there with her. And the mum kind of slightly mocked her and said, what are you doing? We're not Christians. We don't need the Bible. But she just picked it up and she opened it. And as she started to read, she read this: "In my house, there are many rooms." And she thought, oh, that's odd. And so she sort of turned the pages a bit and found another bit. And then she read this: "There was a time to live and a time to die." It's Ecclesiastes 3. And then she tried it once more. She said, I'm just going to try it once more, see what comes up. And so she opened it another page, and it simply said this: "Knock, and the door will be opened to you." And she said in front of all of us there in this conference, she said, I just, for the first time, felt this peace. Not a peace that everything would be okay now, but that there is one I can put my trust in. And that's what the teacher is saying. It's not that everything's okay now. It's not okay now. But there is one that we can fully trust. And so what is our response? It's to trust him. is to say, I don't get it. And I think part of that trust is to say, I'm going to choose to be patient in the now and put my hope in you for eternity. It's to place our lives into his hands. It's to wait on him. As Isaiah 40 says, those who wait for the Lord, who are patient in the now, those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. It's a beautiful gift that we can receive, the strength of God, who will comfort us, who will be with us, and who will lead us through. In Jesus' name, amen.